I will just say, should we ever decide to reboot Mommy Dearest, Carlo Gugino, please. What's going on for Victims and Villains? My name is Josh, and today we're jumping into the directorial debut of Zelda Williams with Lisa Frankenstein. This version of Frankenstein is set in the late 1980s, and it tells the story of a girl who survives a tragedy, moves to a new town, and kind of befriends a zombie that becomes more and more alive via a spree of murder and tanning bed electric shocks. Right off the bat, I want to talk about our two protagonists, Sprouse and Kathryn Newton. These two have incredible chemistry, and I always think that Newton, as an actress, is always stronger when she is in the genre of horror. I loved her in Freaky. I love her here, and these are two of her strongest performances outside of Detective Pikachu, in my opinion, but she's fantastic in this. Sprouse doesn't even utter an entire word throughout the entirety of the film up until the last act of the movie, and I read online that he studied under a mime for 4 months to prepare for this role, and that preparation looks fantastic here. It's always really hard for an actor to express themselves without the use of words or emotions, and when you're solely relying on body language. And Sprouse makes it look completely freaking easy. He is great in this role. This is probably one of his best roles, or I would even go as far as say this is probably his best role to date. He knows how to be kind of that goofy, but also menacing at the same time. And just the way that he interacts with Newton were just some of my favorite moments of the film. The question I know that everyone is going to ask is, how does Zelda Williams, daughter of Robin Williams, how does this fare as her directorial debut? And in my opinion, it's fine. Lisa Frankenstein isn't necessarily a good movie. It's not necessarily a bad movie. It kind of operates right in that sweet spot, the in-between. This is definitely a movie that I feel like has future camp written all over it, but also at the same time, this feels like a cult classic in the making. When I think about Frankenstein-inspired horror comedies, I'm thinking about Young Frankenstein and Frankenhooker. There's a level of commitment in both of those properties that just really beg the audience to just kind of laugh at the absurdity, and also at the same time just kind of go along for the insanity that both of those movies are. And it kind of feels like, I don't know if it was studio involvement, but it kind of feels like a lot of those elements that you want to be over the top and to be really campy and just vibrant just aren't here. And maybe that was what they were going for. Maybe they were kind of going away from the absurdist and more into the romance aspect of it. Either way, I think this movie is charming, and it's a good debut for Williams. I will also say I really think that the 80s aesthetic and the vibrancy of the visuals in this movie really hit home and are really well done. I think they did a good job at capturing the 80s and the aesthetic really well, and the vibrancy here. Also, as a part of that vibrancy, I really love how the 80s kind of worked hand in hand with the development of Newton's character, like from a visual aspect. She kind of has this very shy and timid feel to her, but as the movie kind of progresses, she definitely becomes more and more a little bit unhinged and almost kind of gothic, and that Madonna level of confidence. And I really appreciate the way that the visuals played into that development of her character side by side. I think the pacing of this movie is fine. I would have liked to see it fleshed out a little bit more of some of the elements. Definitely some of the elements that I feel like are kind of flung together are some of the backstory stuff of kind of the explanation of the tragedy with Newton and her mother, but also at the same time, kind of some of the stuff with Carlo Gugino's character felt kind of real ham-fisted in the front half of this. Just feels like they try to establish a lot and it never kind of fleshes out. It just kind of slowly decays from the rest of the narrative. Overall, I had a really fun time with Lisa Frankenstein, and I'm ready to run this through the Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give Lisa Frankenstein a 3 out of 5. I think this movie had a lot of fun. I really loved Kathryn Newton. I really loved Cole Sprouse. The two of them worked both really well individually, but also just their chemistry was just outstanding. And comedy doesn't always land, and it definitely feels like they're trying to do certain styles of comedy, but don't necessarily have the conviction to hit all of those notes at the same time. If you guys have seen Lisa Frankenstein, what did you guys think? Comment below and let me know. But let's talk about mental health. If you guys are new to our content, Mental Health Moment is where we take a theme of mental health out of the film which we're talking about, talk about it for a few moments in hopes to deconstruct the stigma surrounding mental health. As I mentioned, there is a tragedy that befalls Newton's character at the beginning of the film that has told through a backstory. And throughout the course of the film, there's a moment where her and Sprouse are talking, and she specifically talks about how everyone else around her grieved and how she felt like because she wasn't grieving alongside everyone else, that she felt like she was grieving the incorrect way, but also stops to say that grief is not necessarily something that looks the same. That's honestly a fantastic point to take into consideration, because I think sometimes it is so freaking easy to look at someone that has had a tragedy befall them, whether that is, you know, a divorce or the loss of a family member or a friend or loss of a job, you know, so on and so forth. And we think that they need to cope in the same way that we do. When the truth of it is, some of us cry, some of us scream, some of us want to be left alone, some of us want to be surrounded. There is no right or wrong way to grieve, and part of the grieving process is finding what works for you. Not worrying about what others are and just letting that grief, letting the wound of grief have open air so that it can heal. If you or someone you know is struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, click the links in the show notes below. Check out our mental health resource library. Lisa Frankenstein is now playing in theaters everywhere. Hit that subscribe button below and catch us on the next one.